Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Patreon exclusive podcast, The Peel, which is a production podcast that we're going to be making to help whet your appetite between sneak peeks of Team 5. This is our first episode, so it might be a little bit of us finding our footing, and it is not scripted, so we're going to be a little breezier than you may be used to. From the rest of the videos we've done, we haven't gone off script too many times, so I apologize in advance if there is a lapse in professionalism. But hey, I am Spood, and joining me today, as always,
is Cabral. And we say as always is because, we're heading the project and we're probably going to be the ones to do most, if not all of these podcasts together, with some exceptions of, another individual from the cast or crew to join us.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Basically, just wanted to thank you all again for your support. We really do appreciate it. We've seen a lot of generosity from you guys so far, and it does not go unappreciated. We are making the first 10 or so minutes, roughly, of each of these podcasts available as a free preview, just in case people are interested in having a sort of more breezy, a bit of a brief look at the podcast without paying in. But if you are one of those people, feel free to chip in as little as $1 a month, and you'll get access to absolutely everything on the Patreon, including the remainder of this podcast if you find it interesting.
And all the other sneak peeks that we've got, 2 other sneak peeks on the Patreon already?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, we have 2.
We have 3.
Oh, we do have 3 now. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so there's 2 that are full, and then there's 1 that's a little bit more scuffed. It's only storyboards, but it has the audio behind it, and I think
yes,
you're right. Not have music. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but we're probably going to be going over a lot of the origins of the project, just like not the entire podcast, but we want to kind of briefly go over where a lot of this started, where a lot of this came from, and really get into how it all started. And that's probably going to be majority of this beginning bit, is giving an idea of where we came from and where we are now with the entire project, because it's been going on for about 21 months question mark.
I would have to do it in my, because we've been working on it for over 2 years, so it's more like 25-ish at this point. I think we started doing this officially sometime in September, October of 2021,
something like that. Yeah,
it's almost December of 2023, so it's been over 2 years.
Yeah.
It has been a hot minute. The hope for this podcast series is essentially that we get to laser focus in on some stuff that is maybe spoiler free, that we can share with you ahead of time. Maybe weave in a couple more low-key sneak peek type stuff, and just essentially, connect with you as a community to give you our additional thanks and just say, hey, we appreciate you sticking with us. I know that the progress reports are a little samey, a little dry, so this is hopefully something that'll be a little more fun, a little more interesting, and hopefully a little more insightful. And today we were hoping, like Cabral just said, and I don't mean to just reiterate what you were saying, but we were hoping that we could sort of reintroduce ourselves properly, like dig into the origins of Team 5, and then I think we're probably going to spend the bulk of the episode talking about writing.
Yeah, because that was a huge part of the process. Like, I think it kind of goes over my head that we spent 6 months alone writing, and that's not including like the time spent outlining, discussing, and talking about and figuring out like the layout of the series and the episodes and how many there would be, and taking the old script. A lot of this started back in 2015 with the original project that I started with Dom initially. One of my other buddies, he actually helped us with story editing later and did some proofreading and some editorial stuff. But it eventually just fell onto me during 2015. I brought you in as an actor. A bunch of the other people also came in as actors, and I was just doing the writing and everything. And the original episode 1 is actually still around. And what a stark contrast it is from where we are today.
It's not so good. So before we really start digging into all of that, I think it's pertinent. We did go over some of this stuff in one of the older progress reports.
Yeah.
But it was kind of squirreled away at the end, and not as many people were part of the Patreon at that time, so I'm sure most people here didn't see it. So we are going to retread some old ground. We'll try not to repeat ourselves too much, but
Yeah, we'll do
just
our
for the
best.
sake of anybody who's not familiar, why don't you like properly introduce yourself? Like, who are you? What's your
Yeah.
deal?
Well, I'm Cabral or Cabral095 or a bunch of other names all over YouTube. I I've kind of just been a part of a bunch of different projects throughout. I was gonna say time, and that's not the right word I want to say necessarily. Throughout time and space itself, I've done a ton of different like projects. I love writing. I love creating stories. I love not finishing projects. It's kind of one of those things where you go and make something, and then you're really cool and excited about it, but then it kind of fades away, and you get onto the next project, and you're excited about that one and everything. And that's kind of what happened with Team Five at first. And I did go also some other background. I went to college for video and film production. I did script writing classes. I did classes on video editing, movie like analysis, movie summaries, and a bunch of different stuff, including like documentary making, which I'm making one on the side, but that's a different whole story. But Team Five, though, like I'd said, I made a lot of projects and they all kind of fell through. And none have really ever stuck the landing. I made an episode one of a Bridge series once. I made another episode one of a Bridge series once, and they kind of don't go through. But after Team Five kind of fell through, I always kept on the back burner because I really love the concept and the idea of it. And of course, it was Evolution Story back in 2015. As some of you probably noticed from the trailer or other content, there's Sylveon. And that's because Sylveon didn't exist when the story was originally written.
Well, so Sylveon did exist. Sylveon, I think, came out in 2013, 2014-ish, like in X and Y era. Yeah. But it was like still very new. My understanding was just that you like didn't have a very strong attachment to it, or it just kind of flew under the radar as like a thing that existed.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't.
Maybe that was the
part
no.
of the
I mean,
writing
maybe
process.
to be fair, that was like almost 10 years ago now. That was like 8 years
long
ago.
Time ago.
And
long time ago.
even then, that's like when we got together to record. I'm sure I had the writings and the scripts and stuff from before that. Even like discussions with Dom or whatever, ideas about it from before then, in like 2014 or 13, around college time. So I don't know exactly. I feel like it's because, like you said, either didn't have attachment or it was right when Sylveon was introduced, and I already had like a core idea or concept with the original story from way back when. And that's a little bit about me. But what about you? Who are you, Spood? What do you do?
Hi, so I'm Spood. I used to run a moderately successful YouTube channel when I was a teenager. I would record myself reacting to episodes of My Little Pony. And, that gives you an idea of when I was a teenager, roughly. I just sort of through that met a lot of really cool people. And I was lucky enough to surround myself with a lot of people that were very talented and cool and did a lot of really interesting work. And thankfully, I got to sort of splash into a lot of that stuff. But in a similar way to the way that you described, it was just kind of a toe in there, a pinky in there, like, will you voice like this character in this one-off thing? Or, will you like do a narration for this thing? Or, can I get your opinion on this thing? And it was, it was cool that I got exposed to a lot of different projects like that, but very little, if anything, really came to fruition or got completed. And so when I was approached with Team 5, back in the day, it was just, we're talking back in like the 2015 era of things.
Yeah,
it was
in the bygone era.
Yeah, it was like a very, I wouldn't say superficial thing, but it was very entry level. Like, hey, do you want to just voice the main character in this, Pokemon show I'm making? And at the time, I didn't even really, I had like childhood nostalgia for Pokemon, but I hadn't played it, as an adult. I didn't really, I wasn't familiar with anything past like charitably, Gen 4. And I was just kind of like, yeah, sure. I don't have like a real attachment to Pokemon, but I'll do it because I just like to. I like the sound of my own voice, I guess. We're a lot older now, and we've been around the block, and I think that the main objective with Team 5 has pretty much just been, like, we want to finish something, something meaningful, like make a show, essentially.
Yeah, and the thing about it too is not just finish something, but this is a project where you've taken a lot of time and to make sure this is something we can look back on and not cringe at, or that it's, oh, we could have done it a little better. We've been taking so much time because, we mentioned earlier, it's like been 20 plus months of working on this, because we want to make sure it's something we can look back on and be like, that's a cool thing that we made and we're very proud of it. And we're taking all this time and these steps to really bring it to light and make sure it gets an audience and it gets seen by other people as well. Not that that's the only focus of the whole project. We're not here to just be like, oh, you guys have to watch it. It's like, we want to make sure it's something that has a great foothold and a good leg to stand on its own,
And I think we're making something really cool.
Yeah.
It's, like we said, it originally existed in 2015. It's kind of just like we'll just make it and we'll talk about making it and have fun sort of spitballing a story. And then, when you get past the fun part and you get to the part where you actually have to make it, it's a lot less fun. And then you stop doing it because it's just like, well, it's a lot easier to, just imagine the lore or characters that I have fun creating. And it's a lot easier to just, have them do funny dances in my head than it is to...
Yeah.
Chart a specific kind of course for them, in front of an audience of people who don't, aren't predisposed to liking or understanding like the stuff that you're thinking about. So, the main focus of making Team 5, for me was like, hey, can we make something? And like you said, make something that we can really be proud of, that we think stands on its own two legs. And, when you approached me again in 2020, it was about 2020.
Yeah, it was like right after COVID happened.
Yeah, it was definitely, I think it was like summer, fall-ish 2020 where we sat down and actually did the outline.
Because spring, I know I bothered you about it because all the COVID free time came up and I'm like, man, I want to do something.
Yeah. And it was funny. You approached me quite a few times and you said like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we made Team 5? Wouldn't that be fun if we made Team 5?
Yeah, they say third time's the charm, and I work in threes. So 27th time absolutely works.
A multiple, it's he really, you wore me down over a long period of time. And eventually there was a point where I realized like, okay, you really don't want to let this go. And, given that my formative, internet content creation years were all spent doing fandom stuff, I wasn't even sure that I wanted to make content at all, let alone, go back to making fandom stuff. But, I don't know, what can I say? You kind of broke me down on it, and it was like, okay, well, let's take this seriously. Let's make an outline.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can... salvage this idea that's so old and hasn't seen a lot of development, hasn't been, it's just been collecting cobwebs for 7 years.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh, when you say it like that, that's kind of crazy. Yeah. It definitely was the case. Goodness.
Yeah, but I think we made something really, cool. We sat down and it was like, okay, well, what is the scope of something that we can make? What's an interesting story that we want to tell? What are the logistical angles of
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about it without spoiling it, so we're being a little bit over vague. But
we're going to do our best to not spoil as much as we can. You're probably going to learn a little bit about some of the story and some of the characters a little bit here, but the goal is to not spoil everything. Whatever sneak peeks or anything have been on Patreon, you're going to know some of those little elements. So we're going to do our best to, avoid all the spoiler stuff so that way you can enjoy the episodes. And what's nice about this too, by the way, this is being recorded and then edited. So we can always, adjust or whatever we need to do in these podcasts. Yeah. So just know that coming into these podcasts, we're not going to spoil the story. We're not going to spoil elements of it or main plot points or whatever it is. So just keep that in mind because we want to make this very open to you guys because we want to cover more production, not just, again, we'll talk about elements of the story. I'm sure we will, but we want to go over production and the creation and how much time has really been spent on this project. And the man hours and the amount of work that has just gone into it. Like, for instance, not only did we do outlines, we did outlines for characters. We had a lot of stuff from the original stories. Back in the original story, Vaporeon was a lot more goofier. than he kind of is. He's got a couple little jokes that you've seen in some of the sneak peeks and like some of the trailer stuff. But like he was way goofier and way more over the top. And
it was a lot of like random access humor, you know, like
yeah. And
like he would roll around in the grass, you know, and they'd look at him and they'd be like, "Oh, he's not normal."
He's not normal. Yeah.
And you know, it's kind of funny actually when you say it like that, but it just didn't, you know, it was one of a million things that ended up getting changed when we came back to it.
Yeah. In fact, episode 1 has 2 lines that are verbatim from the original script.